Welcome back, Richard. It's good to see you for this midweek podcast.
Yeah, good to see you. Today we're going to talk about another one of those articles that just stopped me dead in my tracks. I mean,
Yeah.
we read a lot during the weeks, and every once in a while, and we've talked about it before, some article comes across and you think, "Whoa, what is this about?" And
Well,
this is one of those articles.
it reminded me of the one from a few weeks ago on the problem with too much self-care. It's like, okay, so wait, we want to do self-care, but then if we do too much self-care, then that's a problem. And so, where do you find this balance?
Yeah, and it's that balance that we're talking about with all of these things. When does it become a problem? And this one happens about self-improvement. The article is self-improvement made me worse. And how could self-improvement make a person worse? I thought we were supposed to be doing that.
Yeah.
This can be a little bit tricky at some point, but at some points. But I think the main thing is the unifying theme of this is that if self-improvement is for you, is to make you better, is to help you clean up your own messes, that's probably a good thing. But if self-improvement is a process by which you're constantly comparing yourself to others, then it can become a problem. And that's what we want to talk about in this podcast.
Absolutely. So the author of this first article points out a couple of things, and one of the things that's pointed out is that yes, if we're not careful, our constant strive towards self-improvement sometimes can lead us to becoming much more critical than we otherwise would be. And like again, while it's important to be critical and to weigh the things that you're doing and the options that you have, sometimes it can lead to us being so critical that we start to look down on other people. We start to have negative opinions of other people because we think, well, compared to all that I'm doing, that person is whatever, and that level of criticism can start to become problematic for relationships and for at home and at work or wherever.
Right. Yes. If your effort to self-improve, if your self-improvement efforts lead you to observing others, their appearance or their behavior, or if you start to become critical of others, as in, well, compared to that person, I'm X, or well, that person's this, but I'm better in this regard, or that person's attractive, but not as attractive. That kind of comparison can become a problem.
Mm-hmm.
It's the comparison that's the problem.
Right.
And because when you're comparing yourself to others, when your self-improvement rests on comparing yourself to others,
Mm-hmm.
it can be very damaging. And therein lies the problem, because you're either falling short if you make a comparison
Mm-hmm.
and you don't measure up, then you're falling short, and that's going to lead to feelings of depression or sadness or envy or jealousy. That's not going to end up in a good place. Or you're feeling superior, and that's not going to end up in a good place.
Right.
So regardless of what you decide when you compare yourself to another, either one is going to it's going to end up in a place where you probably don't want to be, because you're either, well, I'm better than you, or you're better than me, or you're better than I am. And neither of those is a healthy place to be.
Right.
The problem in today's culture is that with social media, with the internet, with easy access to this, you're doing thousands of these mini comparisons every day. Okay. And so judging, because you not only have real life people, like you're on a subway or you're on a bus or you're in an airport, you're comparing yourself to others. Now you have thousands of these things coming into your smartphone, and judging can become an obsession. You can be completely overwhelmed by it.
Right. And the real concern with this is that the more time we spend judging others,
Mhm.
the less time we're spending noticing things about ourselves. And so while it may have began as a process of self-improvement, what it
Mhm.
turns into is more of an evaluation or an assessment of others. And so
Exactly.
we are much less mindful of ourselves, and we're not really making the progress that we think that we're going to be making, or we're trying to make. Instead, we're just assessing and evaluating and being critical of other people.
That's
Um,
right.
there's this
Mhm.
great Mark Twain quote that, where he said, "Comparison is the death of joy," and it is very true that, as soon as you start down that path, you are at risk, at least, for falling into this sort of pattern of endless comparisons, and it just keeps going and going and going.
Right.
And
Yeah, so
those
and
comparisons
he's
don't
right.
matter.
I think Twain was right. It comparison is the death of joy, and I think it's also the birth of misery,
Yeah.
because we know from attribution theory, and we
Mhm.
study part of our training is attribution theory, and we're typically, most of us are not kind when we judge others.
Right.
Okay, we tend to be more critical, more negative about others. So it's just part of the human condition. We do make these comparisons, but if somebody is better, I mean, if your judgment is that this person is better, you're not going to feel very good about yourself.
Right.
You're also not going to feel very good if you're superior to them. So neither one of those things gets you to a place where we really should be. Here's the other thing. Most of the time, the results of your comparisons don't matter.
Right.
At least they don't matter to the other person.
Right. Well, they don't matter as it relates to your own self-improvement.
Right. That's
Generally,
right.
most of the time.
Yeah. So you're going to be in a bad place either way. And so it's the comparison, it's the process of comparing yourself to others. People make poor, other people, these people that we're judging, other people sometimes make poor choices. They don't eat right, or they're not nice, or they're not pleasant, or whatever. They make poor choices. But I'll bet that most of those people don't see that as a problem. You have a terrible diet. Okay. You look at somebody else eating, and Bernie, we all do this. You walk into a restaurant
Yeah.
and you start making judgments about the way people look and what they're eating. Or you go to a grocery store and you look at somebody's grocery cart and say, well, you ought to take half of that stuff out of your cart,
Right.
because that's just going to make your life worse. We're making these judgments. That other person probably doesn't see that as a problem.
Right.
It's only a problem for me.
Right.
I make it a problem. My judgment makes it a problem. My judgment makes it a poor choice. The other person could care less.
Right.
Okay. So as you do this, though, you can come out on top. You can keep comparing and comparing and comparing and feeling very good about yourself. What we should be doing instead is cleaning up our own messes,
Right.
making our life better. Okay. There's it's not about the other person's mess. There's only my mess that I should be concerned about. Okay.
Right. Yeah. I think that, where this is sort of highlighted for me is, we're in this season right now of the Olympics, right?
Oh,
And so
yeah.
you have all of these competitions going on, and those competitions are oftentimes, you against all these other people. And
Right.
so there's one winner and all of that. But there are a few sports, like in my mind, you have a lot of the track and field sports, and you have, or events, and you have like swimming. Those events and those sports are really interesting to me because, yes, while there is an ultimate, winner, what those people are also doing is they're battling against themselves. How many times do they talk about their personal best? You know,
Mhm.
if a sprinter goes out there and they get fifth place, but it is their personal best, it is the fastest that they ever ran that event, that is a win for them. That is yes, they weren't maybe as fast as the people who won, but that was a personal best for them. And you have those sports where the emphasis is really just you getting better as compared to yourself and your previous performances. It's not just a comparison with others, it's a comparison for yourself as well. And I think that that helps to balance it some. And we don't do that in other parts of our life. We don't do that when it comes to how your yard work looks, or how, what kind of car you're driving and things like that. We do that in some sports. Everything else, we just focus on that comparison to other people.
Right. Yeah. And not saying, but I'm getting better, but
Right.
I'm improving where, okay. And I think the sports analogy is a good one. It doesn't matter what the sport is. If you're younger, you can say, well, I run 8-minute miles, which is really good for a weekend, for just a normal person who's out running. If you can run an 8-minute mile, that's pretty good. That's a pretty good workout. The marathon, I think, was run this week, and the person ran it in 2 hours and some minutes. Okay, which means they ran 26 miles, and they were running about 5-minute miles, or about a 5-minute mile. Okay, for 26 miles. Okay, which is, to me, no, I can't do that, but I can run an 8-minute mile. Or I'm a pretty good golfer, but I'm not ready for the PGA Tour right now. So yes, think about how you're improving, okay?
Yeah.
Because it's this comparison that can be damaging, because regardless of where you end up, it's probably not going to be helpful in improving yourself, okay?
Right.
Because that other person has very little to do with you and doesn't care what your opinion is.
Absolutely. Now, the third point that this author makes is that, sometimes self-improvement can come at a price,
Mhm.
and points out the price of loneliness. And again, this one's a little bit, I think that this concept is a little bit challenging because, most of us don't get to a point where we are at the top of the pecking order, right? We don't get to that point where we are the only ones that are up here. There are some people that we'll talk about in a few minutes that are up there, and they
Mhm.
experience some of this. But what I think about is sometimes we set our goals for self-improvement at such a level, and in such limited ways, that when we attain that, we just kind of stop. Like, you know, I think about, you know, we can talk about animal rights and all that kind of stuff, but you think about dog racing, greyhound racing. And one of the worst things that could ever happen is you could have the fastest greyhound in the world. But as soon as it catches the rabbit, as soon as it catches that little thing that it's chasing, it's done. It's not going to race anymore because it's already achieved its goal.
Right.
And so,
Right.
so they have to work hard to make sure that the dog doesn't catch that bait. Um, and it's the same way with the way that we set our goals sometimes. If we set our goals so low for achievement that once we attain it, it's like, okay, well, I'm done. That's it.
Yeah.
Then we are just now. It could lead to what we've talked about in previous podcasts, the ennui. We're just like, okay, we're just bored. It's fine now. We don't care. Um,
Right.
and that can be a problem in and of itself.
Right. Yeah. Um, I have to mention it. The Superman Batman movie.
Yeah.
That's what happened to Bat. I have not seen that movie.
Mhm.
Full disclosure, I've not seen it. Of course, Bernie has seen it,
Sure.
and Bernie has seen every version of it. Apparently, there's more than one version, right?
There's more than one version of Justice League, and I do recommend Zack Snyder's version, though it is 4 hours long. But you're talking about the Batman versus Superman movie, which came the birth of the Justice League.
Right.
It came out first, and yeah, I don't think it's bad to do a spoiler alert now because that movie is very many years old.
Yeah.
But what Superman dies in that movie, and now all of a sudden Batman is left, and even the Justice League's that movie starts out with this idea that we really need him. we there's we can't
Now,
do this alone.
why did Batman feel that he had to vanquish Superman? What? I don't understand. Why do you
Uh,
have to?
because Batman saw him, he was an alien, and there were problems, and Superman didn't like things that Batman was doing, and Batman didn't like things Superman was doing, and they just had poor communication. Their relationship was strained. So
And
they
so
therapy.
Batman gets rid of Superman.
Um, yes, with help, but yes,
Okay, but he gets rid of Superman, and then he suddenly realizes that that was a mistake.
right.
Okay. That now he's alone,
Mhm.
and he really needed this person.
Right,
Okay, so that's sort of this comparison thing again, that you want to vanquish everybody, but maybe you shouldn't, because you might end up being alone and need some help.
right.
Okay, so that movie, I think, serves as a model. But all of these comparisons, first of all, they become obsessive. Second, when you live in a survival culture, when you're living day to day, um, comparisons are useful. That they serve some purpose. It's how we learn our culture, um, and it could be useful. But in our culture, we don't need to do that. We don't need to make those comparisons for survival reasons. It's not for survival. It's just comparisons to see who's better. But these comparisons make us bitter and impatient and angry. That's the point that he's making in this article. When you're constantly, and we see it, how many times have we talked about your Facebook persona? Okay, you have all these pictures of how happy you are and what wonderful food you're eating, what a beautiful hotel you're staying in. And so in today's media culture, we're making these comparisons, and we usually end up feeling worse about ourselves. And I think that's what he's talking about in this article. if if we're making these comparisons, we retreat into this lonely cave of judgment, um, and that's what we want to avoid, is to become isolated, to become lonely. So what we should be doing is we should be getting better for the sake of us getting better. Pursue your best time, pursue your best golf game, pursue your best bowling score. Not that you're better than somebody else.
Mhm.
You're getting better at what you do, not that you're better or worse than somebody else.
Yeah.
Seneca, I think the Roman philosopher, had a quote. He said, "When philosophy is wielded with arrogance, it is the cause of ruin of many." He said, "Let philosophy scrape off your faults rather than be a way to rail against the faults of others."
Mhm.
So use philosophy, psychology, to make yourself better, and not rail against others because you're better or they're not as good as you are.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's another article we're going to talk about, but before we go there, I just feel like we're going to have some movie people really upset about the way that we talked about the Batman and Superman thing, because I know how that author talked about the Batman Superman movie, but just to clarify it and to fix one piece of it. Batman and Superman were against each other for most of the movie, but they did kind of come together to work to vanquish the bad guy towards the end. Um, and it was during that fight that Superman was vanquished. It wasn't Batman specifically that did it. It was a bad guy. So
Well, they made it sound like Batman
yeah.
was somehow involved in his death, and then realized that that maybe wasn't a good thing after all.
Right. Yeah. It was sort of a because he didn't do something, or because Superman had to do something to fix what Batman did. It was that type of thing. It wasn't Batman didn't strike the final blow or anything like that. It was something else. So,
Are
uh,
you
but watch it. I encourage you to watch it. It was a decent movie. But I just wanted to before you went on, it was eating at me that somebody is going to say, well, technically it wasn't Batman that did that. So um, I could just I could just hear the YouTube comments coming. So, but so let's move on. The second article is about um, related, because I think that we've often talked about success as being an individual thing, and I think that when we think about self-improvement, we're thinking about success, and we're thinking about, as you work to improve yourself, what is your goal? What is your idea or perspective of success? And
Right.
this second article is about the ugly truth about success that I think is, and I think that this article is really interesting because it points out some of these same things that, my goodness, CEOs, for example, are twice as likely to be depressed.
Mhm. Mhm.
Um, you know,
Yeah.
high achievers are 4 times more likely to suffer from some forms of mental health problems than those with average grades.
Right.
So with some of this success comes some mental health challenges, some struggles.
Right. Yeah, this article is related because it was one of those things where, take a look at if
Mhm.
you're interested in this, take a look at this. And here's an example of what we're talking about. And this article was written by a different person. But she wrote the article to say, be careful what you're pursuing
Right,
and you should know what land you're beginning to enter
right.
when you decide that you're going to be the top of your profession. Um, and you talk about CEOs or high achievers. A study of 400 high achievers, professional high achievers, found that 75% of them have one thing in common, and that's a troubled childhood, either poverty or abuse or neglect or something.
Absolutely. Yeah, like it was really interesting because they mentioned these people that we all sort of look up to in
No,
a way or
sure.
another. So like
Yeah.
it mentions Elon Musk was bullied as a kid and had an abusive father. And even though, you think of him being at the top, he still works 80 hours a week. He still works a lot.
He's still trying to become more. There's this dissatisfaction that we talked about earlier in the week on the other podcast. There's this dissatisfaction that it can't be satisfied. It's at a level that no matter what you do, it's not enough.
Right.
And so this is that toxic, dysfunctional aspect of self-improvement,
Right.
that just becomes obsessive. And it's just never enough. There's
Right.
always somebody who has more.
Right.
So 50 Cent, I guess he's a 50 Cent is a rapper, right?
Mm-hmm.
Rose from a drug-infested hood. He grew up poor and shouldn't have made it. Howard Schultz, head of Starbucks, grew up in poverty. Most of us know the story of Oprah Winfrey
Yeah.
and her difficulties prior to her becoming an actor.
Yeah.
Um, U.S. presidents, just take a look at any president at the beginning of their presidency and what they look like at the end of their presidency. Abraham Lincoln, when you look at him, when he was like in just that 4 year period, 3.5 year, 4 year period, from the time he entered office and when he left office, his face was it was a completely different person, just a
Mhm.
mass of wrinkles from all the weight that he carried. But it's true for every president. Barack Obama talks about becoming gray
Mhm.
the 8 years and how much they change um, while they're in office. Nikola Tesla, the genius, the physics genius, struggled to sleep even a couple hours a night. So yes, they're at the top of their profession, but it comes at a price, and they're paying a very high price.
Yeah, absolutely. And the author talks about this really interesting uh, idea. And Richard, I know that you have seen it too. We see it in so many patients. People will come in will work with somebody with like an eating disorder or some body dysmorphic disorder, dysphoria or something, and they struggle and struggle and struggle and work so hard to fix whatever it is that they see is wrong with their body.
Mhm.
And then at the end of it, they fix all those things, and then they still have insecurities.
Right.
It's this idea that sometimes even when you get what you're looking for, enough still isn't enough, and
Right.
we
Right.
have to keep going. And we've seen, just the real sad and terrible experiences that some people have had where they've had so much plastic surgery or work done to their body that they're almost unrecognizable.
Grotesque. Right.
So
Mhm.
it's, we get to this point sometimes where enough just it has no limits. It just keeps going and it creates more problems.
Right. And she talks about many of these people, and it's so sad to read this stuff because it's like one person said, the more partners I get, the more insecure and validation hungry I grew. the better my physique got, the worse my dysmorphia grew. And so this urge, this obsession with self-improvement can lead you to places. It can lead you to some very dark places because it's not going to satisfy whatever the problem is, whatever problem you're trying to deal with. The more money I earned, the poorer I felt. We see this all the time with people who, they say, oh, if I could just save $1 million, then I could retire early. But then $1 million isn't enough. It'd be better if I had 2 million. Well, if I have 2 million, it'd be better to have 4 million.
Right.
And so you never really can satisfy it. The other thing is that in today's, so this is an internal process that we're talking about. But in today's culture, we have the external pressures of social media because they're flooding you with this stuff every single moment of every single day. And there are all sorts of examples that come flooding into your Facebook or YouTube or Instagram, whatever you're using. The sheer quantity is overwhelming.
Right.
You can never really ever feel satisfied because you're just being bombarded every single day.
Right. Absolutely. And so as we think about a solution to this problem, I think the biggest or the main recommendation that the author provides and that we encourage often with our patients and people we work with is we have to move towards ignoring what society defines as success.
Right.
And really think about what we want. What do you want and how do you define success? You have to be a little bit careful because I'm sure that the more that you think about that, the more you're going to realize that what you're saying to yourself is what society wants.
That's right. Right.
And that is where we kind of get into this complication of, well, is it what you want or is it what you think you should want? And you really need to break it down, and sometimes talking with someone about it, a therapist or someone about it, it can help because you want to really figure out what is it that you want? What is your goal? How do you define success? And then strive for that and towards that goal.
Yeah, because when I hear people say, well, I'm not sure what I want, I don't know what I want, I don't believe that.
Right.
I believe you know what you want. I believe that you know what you want. I think the problem is you're thinking about what other people are going to think about you when you start pursuing that.
You're thinking that what you want doesn't match what you should want.
Exactly.
And that's a problem.
That's right. But I do believe that you know what you want. I think you're embarrassed to pursue it. You're afraid to pursue it. There's some other thing getting in the way. If you really think about what you want, you're going to realize that for most of us, about 90% of what we want is what society wants us to want.
Right.
What I should be making more money. I should be living in a different house. I should be driving a different car. Everybody wants me to be. No, they don't. What do you want?
Yeah.
This one guy said, I thought I wanted a shredded physique. And he said, but what did I really want? What he really wanted was a cozy little writing cottage, where he could go and be at peace and do his writing every day. Free time. I really would like free time to ponder the meaning of my life. How can I make my life better? That's what I'd really like, because I'd like more free time. Instead of spending 70 hours of work every week, I'd like to have more time to spend doing other things. I'd like to have friends and loving family who cherish me. That's something I really want. I want people in my life whom I care about and who care about me. Those relationships, those kinds of relationships need to be earned, and they need to be fostered, and they need to be maintained. And that takes time and energy that you're taking away from other things. But if that's what's really important to you, then that's where you have to spend your time. Okay?
Absolutely.
Doing what you want to do.
Absolutely. So take some time and think about what is really important to you and what you want and what will make you feel more satisfied and happy in life and how you want to define success.
Right. Yeah.
All right. Well, that is it for today. Until next time. stay happy, stay healthy, and forget to be afraid.